Bitcoin spot ETFs have topped out at $4.5 billion in volume in the first day. Yet it has left retail investors scratching their heads as to why the price fell by 6.87%. In today's video, we're going to be discussing just that. What is going on with the price action of Bitcoin? Why we have seen negative price action with $4.5 billion flowing into the Bitcoin spot ETFs. Let's roll that intro and get right down into it. So hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another Bitcoin update video. We will be jumping down into the charts in just a moment to review what's been going on with Bitcoin. But I do think it's quite important that we understand, first of all, what the Bitcoin spot ETFs are and what are the difference between maybe the futures ETFs, for example. So if you are understanding or want to understand a little bit more about it, just give me a minute here to kind of briefly break down what is going on. The primary difference between the Bitcoin spot ETFs and basically the futures ETFs is that the assets that they actually hold and basically attract their value. So essentially, what's going on with the spot Bitcoin ETFs is they actually hold the Bitcoin, and then what's going on in the background in the $4.5 billion is that their shares that are being purchased on the New York Stock Exchange, for example, right? They're shares of the ETF. So when you invest in a Bitcoin spot ETF, you're essentially owning a share of the cryptocurrencies that are held within the ETF. So essentially you are owning a share of the Bitcoin that is held by the Bitcoin spot ETF. Right, it's a bit of a mouthful. I know a lot of people were thinking you'll have 4.5 billion or hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into Bitcoin directly. It's not into Bitcoin directly. That money is flowing into the ETF, and the ETF owns Bitcoin. So the ETF will eventually, over time, own more Bitcoin. But for now, it is literally shares of the owned Bitcoin. So it's an interesting one, right? And so as we kind of take a look at the charts for BTC, we can see that we saw negative price action. Again, we saw the sell the news event because the money flowing into the Bitcoin spot ETFs is not flowing into Bitcoin directly. It is basically just divvying up shares of the Bitcoin already held by the Bitcoin spot ETFs. Essentially, we've seen a sell the news event and very little buying pressure to prevent it from falling. So we fell down by 6.87% yesterday for BTC. Then, of course, we started to recover a little bit and we're starting to test the existing lows down here as well. Is this bleeding likely to stop anytime soon? I'm not so sure. We have the ability, of course, to rally up a little bit if we needed to, but I think for now, once the penny kind of drops and this news kind of sinks into the retail investor who thought that this was going to be their ticket to the moon, unfortunately it isn't, at least not anytime soon. We are likely to start to see retail investors really feel hard done by, feel that this is a scam, sell their assets and start a lot of negativity, a lot of FUD in the space. Now that comes in with, well, comes with a huge opportunity if you choose to listen to that and to see it as such, right? Because when people are fearful and they have this underlying issue with cryptocurrency, essentially that fear that is seeping into the market is the fear that we want to be buying up. Ultimately, that is the opportunity to buy cheaper assets from these retail investors who maybe are a little bit more emotional about what is going on than maybe they would have liked to have been. Now, ultimately, I see altcoins and Bitcoin coming down into pretty nice accumulative areas before we get an actual bullish move back to the upside. Now, it's possible that we have some kind of FOMO kicking in here, taking us up back towards that kind of $50,000 level. At the same time, I think it's a long shot. I think it's more likely that we're likely to pull back more towards the $30,000 than we are to rally back up towards $50,000. But again, this market is very unpredictable, specifically when we start seeing a lot of FOMO activity from emotional retail investors. Again, we haven't seen any large institutional investors in this market for quite some time, and they were selling into the move to the upside here during 2023. So let's take a look at the charts, right? And I want to focus in on this one here for a moment. So we have another potential sell the news event. It's a bit soon to know exactly what is going to happen here. But we do know that the previous fundamental news that we've seen, everything from the CME side all the way over to the Coinbase IPO and the futures ETFs. The Bitcoin spot ETFs are happening right now, right? We went live yesterday and we're waiting to see what happens. I speculate that we're going to be moving back down to this previous area of support between $30,000 and $33,000, as this was an area that we broke through and you've yet to come back down and retest. So this is the obvious area for me to think that that's where the support lies likely to be found. Okay, so that's going to be the area also on the 50% level on the fib charts, as you can see here, about $32,500. Now, when we reflect on the timing of these things, right, and we can see that the CME went live, and we can see here that it was almost the week after that we saw a lot of negativity in terms of price action. We did drop 84.12% by the time that was all done and dusted. And so we want to kind of reflect here that, yeah, it was a couple of weeks after, really, that we started to see the heavy bleeds. Now, in Coinbase's IPO, it was pretty much on the news. We saw an immediate rejection, but we did bounce up before falling 55.93%. The futures market, again, it was actually stagnant for about 4 weeks before the market realized nothing major was happening. And I think that's really where this one sits. I think, like the futures ETF, the Bitcoin spot ETF is going to be very much the same. People are going to be waiting, saying, nah, money's definitely coming into BTC, just going to sit on it, I'm going to wait. 4 weeks will pass, nothing much will happen, and I think we'll start to see that bleed occur. And in this particular case, it was a 73.62%. Now, I'm not expecting a big drop like that. I would expect us to move from that high that we've recently set down towards this $30,000, about 35 to 40%. That's going to get us right down into the support levels. That's the area that I'm looking for, and the area that I think the most value for BTC and the altcoin market is likely to be. It's going to take some time to get there. I imagine it's a fair few months, and I've been through this a few times already. Let's go ahead and take a look at this chart. This chart here represents Bitcoin on a 3-month scale. Each candle is 1 quarter. And we know that actually over a period of time, we can see that there are red quarters and green quarters, months where, or a 3-month period where we see growth and a 3-month period where we see decline. Now, as I've gone through this previously, the beginning of the year where we have a Bitcoin halving event is typically a red one. So as we can kind of see here, we saw January of 2020 was a red quarter, as in we saw a lot of selling pressure. Okay, and we moved down. We actually closed quite close to where we opened, but ultimately we saw this as a red period in time. And again, this is a very similar story to the time before, okay, where we go over to January over here. This first quarter of 2016 was also red. Again, we opened and closed reasonably close, but there are wicks going up and down within here, and it actually bled out quite a bit during that first quarter. And again, we can come over and we can take a look as to where we were over in here, and this was January of 2012. It's actually a green quarter. Again, open and close a reasonable area. We actually have higher wick to the high side than the low side, but again, there are months in there where it was bleeding out. And so I've drawn this up to help you understand where we currently sit. We currently sit here in this first quarter, leading into the Bitcoin halving event. And as you can kind of see here, guys, the Bitcoin halving event is getting closer and closer to the first quarter of the year. Now, the good news is the first quarter that is after the Bitcoin halving event is a very good quarter. We'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. Here we can see quarter 1 of 2014 was actually red. But if we go over into quarter 1 of January 2017, we can see it's a green quarter. And 2021 was a green quarter here, quite a nice one. And so what I'm looking for here is to say that ultimately I would expect the first quarter leading into the Bitcoin halving event to be essentially a bit of a sell the news event, or sell the news event because of the Bitcoin spot ETF, but a red quarter, and then we'll kind of rally on up. And when we get into quarter 1 of 2025, I expect that to be where we see the significant growth. Now, obviously, we have got 4 Bitcoin halving events here, and at the moment we have a 66.6% statistic saying that essentially we have a green first quarter after the Bitcoin halving event. And also it is the same statistic for the Bitcoin first quarter going into Bitcoin's halving. So again, we're looking at a 66.6% likelihood that we are going to have a red quarter here in quarter one 2024. Now, of course, we have to consider everything else that is going on as well, right? The CPI data has come in a little bit higher than expected, and this isn't necessarily going to be a good sign. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Fed really did fuck up by not going more aggressive in 2023 with their interest rate hikes. The last few pauses that they've had created has actually now put them into a bit of a bad position. They are going to have to, at least in my opinion, increase those interest rates to again try to curb inflation. So if they truly are hell-bent on bringing inflation down in the US, then they really need to be more aggressive with their interest rates. This is not going to be a good sign for cryptocurrency or risk on assets. Typically, when interest rates are rising, people are wanting to gravitate away from riskier assets. They're looking for safe havens for their capital. They're not going to be looking for higher risk investment options. Whereas when interest rates decrease, that is typically when we start to see more, or at least more of an appetite for higher risk investment options like cryptocurrency. So with the interest rates, potentially going to be looking for a rise in the coming months, we might see this issue with Bitcoin and with the crypto market in quarter one being compounded and seeing a bit more negativity starting to emerge. All those hopes and those dreams of a Bitcoin spot ETF being your ticket to the moon may be about to shatter. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And if you're looking for a little bit more about what is going on, you should probably check out this video right here.